panel, but I know what you've been speaking about will be of major interest to all of them from various different perspectives. So we've got Miss Clare Harney, Executive Director of Medtech Ireland, Miss Imelda Lambkin, Manager of DTIF Enterprise Ireland, Professor Patricia Maguire, Director of UCD Institute for Discovery and Co-Director for UCD Conway Sphere Research Group, Miss Siobhan Manning, Innovation Manager at the Mater Misericordiae, and also Mr. Enda Mulvaney, Digital Surgery Lead for Medtronic. And I think the way we do it is I'll ask each of you one or two questions, if that's okay, and then we can move to more general questions for everyone for maybe the second half. Enda, we might start with you. Perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your thoughts on today, what you've heard so far.
Yeah, cheers. Now, before I introduce myself, can I just compliment everyone so far today? It's been an incredible morning, really interesting to see the research, and then listening to Dominic and John in the afternoon there. I think it has set the scene lovely for this conversation. And so my own background, I'm 11 years now with Medtronic, predominantly spent my time in the surgical innovations business. And since February this year, I moved over to lead the new digital surgery business that we acquired last year. So it's an area I'm extremely passionate about and have been banging the table for many years about the use of digital and data to empower surgery. What have I heard today? I've written down a lot of stuff actually today. So I'm hearing a lot around research and innovation, and I suppose where I sit on the commercial side, I've written down innovation to implementation. And, you know, John has kind of flowed nicely into this conversation, what he was just saying. And, you know, we heard Leo Varadkar talk this morning about the funding given towards research and innovation. I suppose the challenge I throw down is, where's the funding for implementation? I think that's a major challenge, you know, once you get to a scalable solution. I do passionately believe, you know, Ronan talked about this morning, about the need for continuous improvement. And I think, you know, in my journey in the surgery world on the commercial side, I've seen what I call surgery 1.0 in open surgery into 2.0 with minimally invasive, robotics being 3.0, and now we are right on the cusp of 4.0, which is digital surgery. And I think the thing that ties all this together for me is what was said this morning around the ability to synchronize data. And I think that's where, in the world I live in, everything we do, we look at data as just, this is patient's information, really, at the end of the day. And so we design everything with security in mind. And I think trying to retrofit is a challenge. So I think anyone who goes into this space really needs to think about, you know, how they manage data, and, you know, compliments again to the team who produced the paper on My Bicycle or Our Park, because I think it really starts a conversation that needs to be had in Ireland. Now, my own role embraces the whole EMEA region, and I'm looking at countries from Germany all the way down to Ireland, you know, different scale, different populations, but I see a completely different way of managing data and how data is standardized. And I really think Ireland, with our scale in this country, I think we can become an exemplar in healthcare as to how data is managed. And I suppose that'll be one thing I'd love to see happen short term, and not be thinking 2025 or 2030, really to start putting tangible goals in place that can be achieved here. And thinking about, and I know Clare is very passionate about this from our work together in Medtech Ireland, you know, the whole patient identifier piece, and how can that anonymization at source happen? Because I do think there's fear. And I think there's fear on every side, and whether that's, you know, the space I'm in is kind of black box technology, you know, where you're capturing surgical video data, and there is a fear surgically around Big Brother watching. I talk about transparency, you know, there's so many other, Ronan talked about aviation this morning. You know, that there's so much can be learned, you know, from video data, but then you have the whole legal challenges. And again, you know, Dominic talked about this. If I talk to hospitals in Ireland, it's a different approach everywhere. If I go to a country like Belgium, hospitals will have group agreements. So one person to talk to, move on. And it just means innovations can become scaled much quicker. And then you look at scalability, as I said, the funding piece. And when I look at it from a research side, digital surgery, who we acquired a year ago, similar to the work we're talking about here today, this started in Imperial College in London. And I do think that's where, you know, John has some great examples of this, where you can start small, but you have to think big and think global as well. If you just stay local, then your idea only ever stays a dream. So I really do think that's where a commercial element has to come to the table early, to empower, let's say, the scientists and the engineers to really ask those tough questions. I kind of the Shark Tank mentality. You know, do we keep funding, or do we just have to fail fast? And then you have the whole challenge around route to market. You know, we do talk about HTAs and, you know, the different regulatory standards in every country. And I do think that that needs to be wrapped up here. And, you know, I've worked for years with the NHS, and yes, they have the early route to market for new technologies, but it's not always easy. Or if you don't know about it, you can't access it. And I'll finish on this, cooperation. And I think Prof Cahill has heard me talk about cooperation many times, but I'm a big believer in, you know, sometimes when industry get brought to the table, trust becomes a big issue as to what's the agenda. I think, you know, I only look at my own business here in Medtronic, and I look at the mission that was written in 1960. And the first thing Medtronic talk about every day is the patient. And it's, you know, and it's something I would say, should there be a fourth pillar to this conversation around academic, industry, research, and patients? Because at the end of the day, is it the patient who owns the data? So, you know, for me, you know, AI is an exciting tool, and I want to put that word in inverted commas. It is a tool. It is not something to fear. It is there to support people, but it is not the solution. And I think the solution is about using digital technology and everybody working together, whether it's in academia, clinically, or in industry, to bring these digital solutions to the fore to improve the standard of training and to improve patient outcomes.
Thank you very much, Enda. That's pretty comprehensive. I think we'll move on. We'll come back to you. I have a question or two. Maybe we might get to you at the end once we've heard from everyone, if that's all right. But thank you very much. Maybe Clare next. I know a lot of what Enda will have said, and also what John will have said there, will kind of resonate with you. And where does Health Tech Ireland fit into all of this?
Yeah, well, so Health Tech Ireland is, you know, representing digital devices and diagnostic industry here in Ireland. And in a nutshell, our key goal is to enable market access. So, but a lot of the issues around getting market access in Ireland have been discussed by the various speakers today in excellent talks. The keynotes were fantastic. So well done to everyone. Very interesting learnings for me. I've written some notes here on it, and what Enda said just there about, you know, innovation to implementation. So there are a number of steps along the way in between that. There's the research, and sometimes it's difficult to conduct research here in Ireland. And that's usually around the availability of data, how expensive it is to capture that data, and then the quality of the data. And do you have permission? Again, who owns it? And, you know, our goal is to bring together industry with and represent at the highest levels of policy to try to ensure that those issues and barriers start to come down for the benefit of everyone. And I think that fourth pillar of the patient is really important, because evidence now is showing that patients and people absolutely support the use of their data in an appropriate manner. And they actually expect that their data is being used in an appropriate manner to facilitate advancement in healthcare for the greater good. So from the research step, then you might go to the trial or the pilot stage. And again, you face issues at that point. We have great capability now for developing small pilots, particularly around digital health, which can be sometimes easier to implement on a very small scale. But without the key partnerships and agreements in place early, commercial agreements in place early around scalability, that implementation at a national level can't happen. And at the moment, I think, you know, we've long suffered from death by pilot here in Ireland. We don't have a standardized evaluation tool for innovation. And if we had something like that, and it's something that's been researched and published by Medtech Ireland in one of our most recent papers around procurement, we're not evaluating innovative solutions in such a way that there could be a sort of a standardized bar set that, you know, if the performance is above a certain level, that the scaling happens and that there is a mechanism for that to happen. We don't have that mechanism at present. And that's something that Medtech Ireland is actively working towards in partnership with the HSE. And this partnership and collaboration is increasingly important now going forward. And we've recently signed an MOU with the HSE, with Martin Curley's department, in order to help channel innovations into the health system. And this is a new level of partnership and trust that we're beginning to see, and that willingness to work together. And I think we've seen the evidence of industry coming to the table during the pandemic and providing innovation fast, often free, during the pandemic to help. And we've also got a bank of evidence now of how well digital solutions can actually work and help. So, you know, it's really important that we don't roll back on that. But we still have those issues around data capture, and how do we manage data? How do we share it? How do we use it? And what permissions do we need in order to be able to do that? Consent, we're discovering, it's a dynamic thing, so it's not static, and it shouldn't really be just procedure based. So it shouldn't be based just around surgical procedures. It generally actually follows the entire patient pathway, the entire journey. And that is a really good way to involve people in their healthcare and in their procedures, and to be able to share their data appropriately and feel empowered. The idea of a centralized health record type database, you know, we've suffered a catastrophic cyber attack. Evidence would suggest that a federated approach to data storage may be safer. There's no need for a large centralized repository of data. There can be summarized, anonymized data, but data can be held locally where it's captured, with an interoperability infrastructure and framework nationally that allows appropriately credentialed researchers, industry, and healthcare providers to access and pull data that they are entitled to or need in order to provide care or to carry out research. So that data stays where it is until it's drawn up. And again, standards are key to that data, you know, being of high quality and actually being usable, especially when it's being pulled up from many different locations. And we have, you know, the Internet of Health things, so the wearable devices that people are using now, really, really rich source of data, but it's always on. So you will have heart rate recorded over a 6-month period on anyone with a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or any of those devices. Can that be used for research purposes? Absolutely. But the format of that data is really important. And, you know, can it be put into a format where it's comparable with other clinical data, for example? So, you know, we need to deploy things like AI to be able to use that data appropriately so that it actually is of help in research. So there's a lot of things that need to be done, but those technologies are there. Digital health is not the answer, it's the enabler. So, you know, digital surgery improving, and you know, I was blown away by some of the earlier talks this morning about what can be done. And, you know, as an enabler, an education tool, improved training, improved precision, it's a game changer. And as an enabler to improve outcomes, it's fantastic. And you know, with the way the world is going, I know we hear it all the time. We have an aging population, a growing population. we now need to use those tools as enablers in order to be able to provide world-class care. And I would agree with all of the speakers that Ireland is primed to be a global leader in this space, given the size of our population and our demographic. So yeah, I think a lot of challenges ahead of us, but nothing that we can't achieve. And I think initiatives like this being discussed this morning around digital surgery is fundamental. It's one of the fundamental things that will bring us forward in this space. There's been some great evidence gathered from it, and we need to now use that and leverage that to scale and make it available to everyone.
Oh, that's great, Clare. Thank you very much. I'm going to come back to you at the end, and I'm going to ask you, what would you most like to see happen after this conference? And Enda here as well, the same. So you can have a think about it, and we'll come back to you. We'll do a rapid fire questions and answers. We might move on to Imelda next, if that's all right. Talking about enablers, certainly DTIF and Enterprise Ireland has enabled a lot of work to be done from our side of things here. Imelda, you might tell me a little bit about it and what's gone well so far and what have been the lessons learned.
Sure, thanks Niall, and very good afternoon. So maybe a couple of general points first on innovation and the innovation ecosystem, and then I'll talk a bit more about DTIF. But I suppose at Enterprise Ireland, we're working to a 5-year innovation strategy. And it's based on the premise that there is a real correlation between increased R&D investment and improved productivity. And so we have a very large company client base, and they range from everything along a spectrum of highly innovative companies and researchers, like many of you at a session like today, through to companies and teams that are only taking their first steps. And so we have an agenda really to increase the effectiveness of innovation undertaken by client companies, to increase the number of clients investing in innovation. And so we're developing a variety of tools, and actually Clare mentioned something there around the innovation sort of tools that we need in this country. And we're developing things like scorecards and roadmap tools and things like that. Then at the higher end of innovation, we administer the Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund for government. And of course, this is a huge opportunity nowadays in Ireland. It's an opportunity for innovation at scale. It's a huge opportunity for any of Ireland's innovators, medical device or otherwise. And I suppose a key point is that the fund is collaborative in nature, and I think it comes back to several of your earlier speakers making the point around collaborative cooperation, etc. That here we now have a fund that targets the bringing together of small, medium enterprises, inventors, innovators, large multinational corporations, and our academic researchers, and even our medics, our surgeons, etc. And to us, it's that bringing together that brings the uniqueness to these projects. So I suppose what we see is that it should build on research in Ireland, and we've had very significant investment in the last decade or so. So we hope to leverage that investment and to do that for real economic impact. And of course, in an enterprise agency or the Department of Enterprise itself, what we're hoping to do is to enable companies to create jobs and to enable the companies to compete globally. And of course, in a sector like yours, I think you all understand that very well, only too well, I'm sure. So Niall had asked me to give an idea of, how's it going to date with the DTIF, and then just a few points on lessons that have been learned. And I suppose the types of things that are going well, we've been delighted to see the mobilization of companies and the research community competing for funding. And to give you a feeling for that, it's the first time we've had a competitive fund for companies. And so for us, we weren't sure, will companies want to compete? Will they be capable of competing, for example, in the same way that they do with European funding? And here we have, 3 calls under our belt, and companies can do it. There's an appetite there and they want to do it. They're looking for this. So we believe it's working. We've approved 235 million euros of funding to date. And I suppose that's of a total 500 million euro budget. It varies across sectors from life sciences, medical devices, AI, through to manufacturing, energy, sustainability areas. And we've often said with our recent call, it's varying from space through to subsea drilling and everything in between. But I think you'll all be very aware it's absolutely dominated by life sciences and medtech. So what we would say in terms of what's going well for GTIF, it really appears to be working for you, for your communities. And so for us, that's a very interesting point. It's why is that, what's working, etc., etc. So just a couple of points then on sort of lessons learned. Many of the projects are actually led by small, medium enterprises, startup companies, university spin-outs, etc. And the types of thing we're seeing, they usually have seed funding in place. They have a highly disruptive project. It's high risk, high potential. But the companies themselves are very capable. They have very capable teams. They're looking for high growth. And they're all, you'd say, very positive learnings. But on the other side for us, we're really learning more as an agency as to whether they can fundraise, whether they can co-fund the projects, and actually can they really sustain research activity that's at such a large scale. Very interesting for us to see how that works in your type of a collaboration. Collaboration. It all comes back to that. And I suppose really what we see in terms of our learnings, the collaboration brings the real novelty to the projects. And what we're looking for is that that project is the sum of all parts. It can't be done without that partnership. There's a piece missing. So what we have seen is we see people trying to squeeze into something that looks like a partnership, but perhaps it's not really. Perhaps it's a sort of customer-supplier relationship traditionally, through to absolutely innovative collaborations, exactly what I think we want here. We've done one final point, I would say. We've carried out one pretty significant review of the fund, and so far what we feel is that it's showing us that we're funding very disruptive innovation. It's showing us that in some cases we're straying into what is defined out there as radical innovation rather than disruptive innovation. Innovation that may contribute to the market as it is, as opposed to creating new markets. And for us, we're beginning to look at, what next? How do we redefine? What changes could we make to the calls? Do we keep them as they are, or do we do something different? And we're thinking along the lines of, for example, theme-specific calls. So just a final point I would make for us, watching, say, a project like this colorectal cancer project, we see, Nature publications from your academic partners. We see new rounds of investment into the small, medium enterprise in your project. And we see a very high-end promoting of the project through a company like IBM. And to us, they're the exact types of things that we're looking for with a fund like this. We believe it's showing us that we're operating in the right circles, but we're absolutely conscious that we love to get your feedback. So I'm really interested in some of the speakers' comments earlier, for example, and I'd be happy to do a one-to-one with anybody to talk more detail as to what you all think is working with GTIF.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Imelda. I'm sure there'll be people taking you up on that. If you don't mind, we'll move on to Patricia now. Thank you very much, Imelda, again. Patricia from UCD, and you might tell us about UCD's role in this and your experience in digital health innovation.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much. I just want to say everything that I've heard this afternoon from both our keynotes from Dominic and John, and also from my other fellow panelists has just resonated so closely. I can find myself nodding all the time to the points raised. But yeah, so I am here with my UCD hat on. I am the director of the UCD Institute for Discovery, and I'm also a professor in biomedical science in UCD. And in UCD Discovery, we have just launched the AI Healthcare Hub, and we are working very closely with UCD Research. So hopefully you've all know Colin McMahon and Kevin Murphy, who are key members of the team, and we're working around their health data campaign. And just, I suppose, just to give you some background, one of the projects that we're currently incubating in the AI Healthcare Hub in UCD Discovery is a project called AI Preemie. And AI Preemie is a current finalist in the Science Foundation Ireland AI for Societal Good Challenge. And this is a program focused on finding novel diagnostics for preeclampsia. And just in one line, preeclampsia, just so that everybody knows, it can causes the death of 50,000 mothers and 500,000 babies every year. And another 5 million babies are born prematurely, sometimes as early as 25, 26 weeks of gestation from preeclampsia. So it's a devastating disease for the families and mothers and babies involved. And so the AI Preemie is working in collaboration actually with the 3 Dublin maternity hospitals, and that's covering 50% of all the births in Ireland. And right now it's a hybrid test. It's a blood test combined with data, combined together with machine learning, artificial intelligence, and that's working right now across these 3 very busy Dublin maternity hospitals, and actually got set up in the last year with all the issues around COVID, but that's working really well. And the idea is really to combine information at these critical times of delivery for the clinicians. So we like to think of it as rather than artificial intelligence, that we're almost augmenting the intelligence for clinicians at these right critical times. And so that's I suppose my background and experience with health innovations from a UCD perspective. I could talk all day about challenges and the big challenges. I think just really quickly, and you know, a lot of my fellow panelists have already touched on a lot of things, hence my fervent nodding. But you know, one thing that mightn't have really been touched on from an academic perspective is getting actually, you know, we're great at making algorithms and designing algorithms, but actually getting them into production in the real world. And, you know, avoiding this massive chasm of, you know, actually we can create algorithms, but implementation, and I know, I think it was Enda, my fellow panelist, was talking about implementation, but, you know, real world, getting it out of the lab and getting it into the real world. And we're very conscious about that in the AI Healthcare Hub. Another aspect, I suppose, that may not have been touched on already is bias and kind of avoiding bias associated with AI. And then, as everybody has talked about, is access to data. And you know, really, I suppose what drives us in the AI Healthcare Hub and in UCD is trying to give relevant patient information to clinicians where and when it's needed. I mean, that is really, you know, the patient is at the center of this. And what we found in the AI Healthcare Hub, especially on this project in the maternity hospitals, is that it's not just, and I think it was Clare who spoke about this earlier, it's not just, you know, data, it's actually this rich, holistic data, the right data, this quality data at the right time, and it's integrating all of this data across the patient journey. And I know Dominic touched on this earlier in terms of data literacy and training, and you know, in UCD, we're very passionate about interdisciplinarity and very passionate about you know, providing the tools to the basic scientists, the basic clinicians to understand data and understand and become data literate, really. And that's a huge issue. And I think all my fellow panelists have touched upon collaborations, and I suppose I should really talk about that from an academic perspective. You know, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for real, sincere academic industry partnerships, and that's what Imelda, you know, and Enterprise Ireland have done in these DTIFs. You know, real collaborative, trustworthy partnerships. And building relationships. It's at the end of the day, you know, this is all about people. That's one of my mottos anyway, personally. But you know, where academics deliver on clear upfront milestones, they deliver on KPIs, but always, as I go back, you know, with the patient's voice and the patient really at the center of all of this. And so again, just, you know, the real thing, I think, and one thing we've learned in UCD is that access to data is paramount importance. And I love, you know, where is Ireland? And this is my last point. And you know, where is Ireland on all of this? And I loved Dominic Crotty's idea around this sandbox approach. I think, you know, Ireland with our population, we could have a vision very similar to what they have in the Nordics, you know, where they're mainstreaming data and they're, you know, really the Nordics are the Denmark, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people across Denmark in terms of these are leaders in providing these coherent clinical pathways built on data. And, you know, it's quality data, but it's really, you know, what we really want to be able to do. And I think academia is really, really 100% behind this, is be able to have access to relevant patient information when it's needed, and as my fellow panelists talked about, do this in a really secure, transparent way.
And what's the university's role in all that, do you see?
Yeah, so the universities facilitate this. I mean, you know, I suppose what, if anything, what COVID has taught us is, you know, we're good at blue sky thinking. I mean, this is, you know, vaccines were able, you know, the RNA technology for vaccines was able to be leveraged very quickly because the universities had this, and they were already collaborating with industry around this. And you know, so I always like, what is the, you know, the uncovered rough cut diamonds that we have in our universities that are just, you know, with the right, you know, and I think it was Clare that said death by pilot, but I know we do a lot of pilots, but actually, you know, pilots do, and I've seen it, you know, pilots do transfer into, you know, hopefully into the real world. I've seen it happen. And we're doing that so I think, you know, there's a lot of access to a lot of information and a lot of, I suppose, blue sky thinking in the universities that can help drive these ideas forward. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much for your time, Patricia. Thank you. The last person we have to talk on the panel is here representing the hospital, who hasn't really had much of a voice today. It's Siobhan, who's innovations manager at the Mater Hospital. And Siobhan, I think other than telling us a little bit about yourself, I suppose I'd ask you, why does the hospital want to do this? And how does innovation fit into the whole hospital landscape, which is already full up with all the other challenges of COVID and GDPR and cyber hacking, etc.?
It's a long list, isn't it? Yeah, so I'm an innovation manager in the Mater since 2019, and so that's when we set up an innovation function. So I'm sort of taking it from a very, very embryonic state and trying to make something of it. And that originated from, in a couple of years before that, the hospital executive had identified that it wanted to set up an innovation function. So actually they had asked us to do a consultation process to sort of figure out, well, what exactly does that mean to the hospital, and why would we do it, and what is the business of an innovation function, and that sort of a thing. And it was a really, really worthwhile process, because it was clear that innovation means different things to different people, which of course it does. But what emerged from that is, in the initial stages at least, our raison d'etre, I suppose, or the reason we were doing this was a need to accelerate the transformation of services, improve services for our patients. That innovation is a way of doing that. That's fundamentally the reason. Another reason then would be to motivate staff. So for staff in the hospital, engaging in innovation is a very exciting thing. It can be very satisfying as a way of solving problems. And attracting and maintaining the best staff is becoming a bigger and bigger issue for hospitals. So that's another major plus for us on it. And I suppose the other reason for doing it as well is at some level there's sort of a sense of having a mission or a duty to kind of contribute to healthcare. So that is very much there as well in the hospital. So based on that, for the last number of years, a lot of what I've been doing, I suppose, is figuring out how we might engage in that. As I said, we're very green still at this stage and we're just learning. But I figured the best way of doing it was just to get on with it. So what I actually spend a lot of my time doing is just connecting people in the hospital with people outside the hospital. That's probably the simplest way that I could describe it. And doing that with a view fundamentally to find novel solutions to problems that we're facing, and try and make things better for our patients at the hospital, and possibly wider than that again. And sometimes, so it's about trying to find a novel solution, maybe by we do a lot of work with designers, a little bit with engineers, maybe just looking for funding opportunities, whatever it takes to create new ideas. And then I suppose working with the relevant people to try and drive that forward, whether it's finding them funding or whatever it might be. And it varies a lot what I end up doing, but it's figuring out a way to implement it with them. And it might be small scale or it might be large scale. It might be finding an industry partner. It could be anything. But I suppose it's important to say as well that that's the role that I hold at the moment as innovation manager. I work in matter transformation, which is a unit in the hospital it's quite unique. It was set up at a broader level to help improve services and drive change in the hospital. And it's been there since 2013, and there's a Lean Academy within the office. So that's about the application of Lean Six Sigma methodology to improve processes. And then more recently, we've established a collaboration with the National College of Art and Design, bringing in their medical device designers, interaction designers, service designers, and working directly with our clinical people to try and solve problems. But fundamentally, like where we come from in matter transformation, it's all about getting the frontline people solving problems. So that's our real passion, and that's what we're really interested in. It's not so much, I suppose, testing something that has emerged externally, but rather helping our staff to solve our problems and to influence healthcare. But more recently then, the hospital has also appointed a director a clinical director for innovation, which is in a unit now called the Pillar Centre, which holds the function of driving education, research, innovation in the hospital. So that's not our core business, but it's an important part of our mission. And that new role will probably place more focus now on the opportunities, mutually beneficial opportunities of engaging with industry. So that's just to give you sort of a quick sense of what's happening in the hospital and kind of what our current focus is.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think I can start with you with the last question. We've only a minute or two left. The main thing we wanted to do with this today is to try and instill change and to really push on and go from here. So if you were to say what is the one thing or things that you'd like to see happen after today's conference, or what's the next steps in innovation in Ireland?
I would say that it is, speaking on behalf of, or sort of representing, I suppose, the on the ground view in hospitals, it's ways of helping healthcare workers to engage with SMEs and others involved in this space in a kind of de-risked way. It's very difficult for us because it's so labor intensive. It can be very costly. It's hard to do things that don't have a guaranteed output. So it's about sort of de-risking that engagement.
Fantastic. Anyone else on the panel, maybe? Patricia?
Yeah, I mean, I probably covered a lot of it already. I probably forgot to say that you asked me about the university, we've got very clear, transparent frameworks to IP and who owns the IP. So I probably forgot to say that, but I mean, I think really it's access to data in a very coherent way, access in a secure, transparent, coherent way, and data across the data journey. I think that's really key. if you know, if we're going to move forward in an ecosystem, that has to be central place.
Imelda?
I think just a comment to say, keep feeding back what's working for you from the funding perspective. You know, we have an early stage fund. We're looking to make it work. We're open to ideas, and keep them coming. It's there for you, so let's use it as well as we can.
Thank you. I think I saw your hand up, Clare.
Well, I would say, following from today, a way for innovative startups and SMEs to actually get sales in Ireland in the health system. We have the likes of EI talking about huge sums of money that are being allocated into the building of innovative solutions here, and you know, it's on us now to make sure that the people of Ireland benefit from those solutions in some way. And the first step towards that, I think, is shifting the conversation from seeing innovation in healthcare as a cost to seeing it as an investment. And I think that mindset change, that it would be a paradigm shift. And I'd love to see that following this conference.
Perfect. And last word with you, Enda.
Yeah, thanks, Niall. So yeah, just to echo what everyone has said, but for me, consistent approach to data management, not piecemeal. A funding pathway similar to what Germany have done with the DVG. So it's not just about research and innovation, it's about implementation. And I just encourage everyone involved in academia and research and innovation, embrace the access you have to industry in Ireland. Medtech Alley is here. And it's not just about regulation and research. You have huge commercial intelligence and skill sets in this country. So let's close the loop from innovation to implementation.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Enda. That brings everything, I think, nicely to a close. I just want to say thanks to all the speakers, everyone listening, everyone at IBM and UCD in running the event. A lot of stuff has been discussed here today, but I think the most important thing to say has been touched on there, is that we don't want it to end here. And today has served to highlight that we can be a centre for innovation, not just at university level, but also getting products all the way through to market. And there are lots of people in the country willing to do that. So thanks very much, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.